I'd like to take a few minutes and just share some of the thoughts that have been stirring in me over the last couple months as I have spent time thinking and praying and reflecting on the church and the season that we've come out of that has been so wild and disorienting, the place that we are, and the season that we're entering into. And first, before I go any further, if you are a pastor or a church leader, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the work and the hours and the time and the care and the love that you have put in historically, but particularly this last year. That your efforts and your commitment to be faithful to hear the voice of God and to care for the pain of your people really, really matters. And that's the heart that we have to maintain and we have to continue going forward. But it has been hard. And I just want to acknowledge that all of the rest that has come after this cannot be done without acknowledging the challenge that we have been through in this last year. What I hope to offer in this video is some language, perhaps a perspective or even a way of thinking about the season that we're entering into. And part of the reason that I'm going to bring some language and help us think through this is I actually have a bit of a concern that has been growing in me as I've been watching. And not a concern that can't be corrected or things need to be burned down, not that kind of concern, but a concern that says I think we need to be attentive, or we're going to miss something. So it's concern, but it's also a longing and a hope for what God has for us in the church, but also in our churches, in our local congregations. In this last year, I've found some of the language that Richard Rohr uses in some of his writings to be really helpful. And this, I don't want to tangent into unpacking his theology or where we sit on this, but I like language, and there are certain words that help make sense of things. And Richard Rohr uses language in some of his writing where he talks about the rhythm of life and the life cycle that we go through, which parallels our theology of life, death, and resurrection. But he uses language of order, disorder, and reorder. That this is this cycle, the organizational cycle and a life cycle, and this process that is part of the rhythm of life, of where we have this place of order, which is, when it's healthy, a real place of stability and of groundedness and things being in alignment. When it's unhealthy, it starts to get rigid. And following this period of time when actually the life-giving stability of order begins to enter into the rigidity of order, we end up entering into a season of disorder, where the old systems and structures and ways of being don't work or aren't as effective or need to be undone. And out of that period of disorder, that season of disorder, we enter a season of reorder, where new order is emerging and new rhythms and new systems and new structures that leads us back to a place of stability and a place of new order. And I like that language. I want to take it a little bit further in some of the things that I've been thinking about as it pertains to the church moving forward into the next season. The concern that I have as I've sat with other pastors, as I have worked with pastors in my office in consulting work, my concern is that our fatigue of being in a season of disorder, which I think doesn't come as a surprise to anyone, that this last year has been incredibly disordering and exhausting. Disorder is exhausting. It's brutal. And that there is a fatigue that has emerged in the season of disorder that is actually causing us to want to create a new order very quickly. And my concern is that we're going to rush right into establishing a new order, which is going to end up creating rigidity and not stability, because we skip over a season of reorder. Let me explain a little bit more of how I'm thinking about that. When I think about the season of disorder, this actually is parallel a lot of the language that we hear in our society when we talk about deconstruction, right? When we have, this is what we've known, this is how we've done it. Now we're bumping up on things that make us question, why have we been doing it this way? Do we need to keep doing it this way? Maybe it's not working. We tend to let's just chuck it. We throw it. We disentangle ourselves from it, which is disorienting, right? It turns things upside down. We lose our bearing. We're not sure where we are. But to bring new things, we have to in some ways let go of some of the old things. So the deconstruction itself isn't an inherently bad thing. And actually in 2020, there was a huge necessity for us to enter into a period of disordering, right? Of deconstructing certain things for us. But what the temptation that we're faced with right now, because of how tired we are with the disorder season, is we want to cast the new vision, we want to identify the next steps, we want to make the new plans, and we want to step into the order that will bring us stability. But the challenge is there is so much yet unknown. There is so much unknown in our world. There is so much unknown in our communities. There is so much unknown in our individual congregations that as I talk with pastors, this experience that so many are having of going, I don't know what things look like a year from now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now, that the future feels more unknown now than it has in a really, really long time. And because of that, it's more exhausting. Because of that, there's this pull to create and establish something new. But the risk that we run if we skip through reorder is that we end up creating a rigid stability that is very quickly going to have to be deconstructed all over again. Because while it may be stable, it may be solid, it might not be the right stable. It might not be the right solid. So I want to talk and think for a minute about this season of reorder. And I actually like to think of it in terms of reordering. Like we're not in a season where things just fall into reorder, that actually there's a process of reordering. And actually the language that I like to use is a season of experimentation. That when we have deconstructed, we enter into a place where we have to try some things on. We have to figure some things out. This is a moment where actually I think a lot about the middle schoolers that I used to pastor a long time ago. That middle school is a season where there's like this disordering, and then there's this reordering where like, I'm not a kid anymore. I don't do those kid things, but have no idea what future self is going to like. And so you have a kid that shows up one day with one style and the next day with another style, and they're like trying things on and trying to figure out who they are. And that reordering, that experimenting season is actually an essential component to growth. That one of the things that we see when experimentation isn't allowed and someone gets locked into something too early, there ends up being resentment and bitterness and frustration later on, and they throw it off and then have a whole nother reactivity season of deconstruction, of disordering, because there wasn't room for experimentation. In our fatigue of disorder and deconstruction, we find ourselves beginning to chase stability. That's not inherently a wrong thing, but we also miss the opportunity to allow space for the emergence of new dreams that God would have us dream, and new vision that God would give us that doesn't happen instantaneously, but must be worked through and given space for it to find its way up into the midst of us. And if we don't take time for experimentation, for reordering, what we will end up finding is a new rigidity. The invitation that I want to offer and encourage is to intentionally create space in your communities, explicit space for experimentation. This isn't just inside projects, but within our communities as a whole. That we're in a season of reordering where what we will be, we don't yet know, right? What our world will look like, we don't yet know. And we're in a season where we need to leave some room for some experimentation. Now, disclaimer on that, I am aware that regular experimentation and starting things and then starting other things has a way of destabilizing, right? Like has a way of really unsettling a community and an organization as a whole, right? That when we think organization, we think community, we do need some stability. I want to suggest that the stability that we need isn't the consistency in what we do. That actually we may need some shiftings and some room to try and to retry and to try some other things again. What will bring stability is a community that has relational and emotional safety. And what I mean by that is a community where there are three primary things that are intentionally fostered and given room for and focused on. And the three primary things that facilitate and create space that is safe, that is inviting, that has room for the experimentation that we need, that actually creates stability in the midst of some of the experimentation that we need to do. These three things are openness, reliability, and fairness or equity. And this comes out of attachment-based research talking about what safe environments are in families and in systems. And I want to offer this to us as communities of faith as we think through this, that what will balance out the instability that will come with experimentation is if we have a community context that has some relational and emotional safety. So when I talk about openness. What I mean is a community where we have the freedom to talk about all of it, right? And when we're going into a season of experimentation, this is vital that we can talk about the hopes we have for the experiment, what the experiment actually felt like, what we liked, what we didn't like, how it negatively impacted us, what was different than what we expected, how we might change it if we were to do it again. That there's an openness, and not just top-down openness of leaders giving feedback or responses, but bottom up as well, and integrated throughout, that there are avenues and places for people to be having conversations about the experiences that they're going through, so that it fosters more room for more thinking, for more ideas, for more creativity in the space of openness. So that's the first part. The second part is a community where there's reliability that's present. And when we enter into an explicit season of experimentation, we want to be careful that we aren't also entering into a season of unreliable experimentation, that we are intentional about the experiments that we run, that we do the things that we say we're going to do, that we don't do things we haven't said we're going to do, and we don't not do things that we have committed ourselves to do, that we're thoughtful, we're wise, we make intentional choices, we try them, we process them, we talk about that there's reliability in the openness, that we don't say, hey, it's fair game to talk about it, and then someone comes to try to talk about it, and then we aren't available to listen and to process with them, that there is reliability, so that when there is a plan set in motion, that plan is followed through with. That actually reliability, even in the context of experimentation, can create a sense of stability within a community during that season of reordering. The third piece has to do with fairness, or equity, is this language around safety. And what that means is that it doesn't simply privilege the voices who have been used in the past. When we're in a season of reordering where we're trying to find our way forward into an unknown future, to simply rely on the voices that we've listened to in the past is not going to cut it for us. That if we're imbalanced in the sense of who we're listening to, of who we're drawing ideas from, of who we're giving space for, we really limit the room and the opportunity for things to emerge and to develop. So a community that can be intentional to foster safety through openness, through reliability, and through fairness and equity in balance within the voices and the experiences of the community, when we can create this sense of relational and emotional safety, it leaves room for experimentation in a way that doesn't flip and unsettle the community unnecessarily. Experimentation creates space. It creates space for a new vision to emerge. It creates space for new voices to be heard. It creates space for dreams that have not yet been given an opportunity to be dreamt, to actually be dreamt and to be experienced. And it gives room for the Spirit of God to bring into our communities fresh vision, new ideas, new expressions, things that God would have for us. That if we rush through with what we know, we will miss the opportunity to discover new things, or even old things that are done in new ways. So I want to encourage you, don't miss the reordering season. I know we're fatigued. I know that we're tired. I know that we're worn down. But the season that we're entering into, and some of us are in it, but the season we're in and headed into is as critical as any season that we've been in. And I want to encourage you, hold course. Leave room for exploration and for experimentation, for reordering to emerge over time in the context of the relationships that you have. I know there's an urgency to get there. I know we long for stability, but we must not jeopardize the future that God has for us due to our own longing for something that would feel stable today. If you need some help with this, you've seen my information on the bottom of this video, BrianJamesConsulting.com. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to help you think through this, to think through how your organization might be intentional around creating a context for experimentation and exploration within an environment that has safety for the relationships of the people that are present. I hope this is helpful. I'm sure that for many of us, we'll talk again soon. Take care.